So this literally started over a group chat drama situation, but with gods. One uninvited goddess, one golden apple, and three of the most powerful women in Greek mythology throwing hands over who's the prettiest. That single argument is the actual documented origin point of the Trojan War. Not politics, not land. A petty argument that spirals into a full decade-long war. Let's get into it. And before you assume I'm exaggerating this for the bit, I'm really not. This is genuinely how ancient Greek storytellers explained the origin of one of the most famous wars in all of mythology, a 10-year siege, countless deaths, entire kingdoms falling, all traced back to one uninvited goddess being petty at a wedding. Let's actually walk through how this escalated, because every step of it is unhinged. Quick thing before we dive in. If you're new here, we cover ancient history and mythology like this every week. Real myths, zero boring lecture energy. Hit follow now so you don't miss the next one. So here's where this whole disaster starts. A wedding between a mortal king named Peleus and a sea goddess named Thetis. Basically, every single god and goddess on Mount Olympus gets invited to this thing. Every single one except one. Eris, the goddess of discord and chaos. And listen, if your entire personality and literal job title is discord, maybe don't leave her off the guest list because that energy does not just disappear, it comes back. So Eris, understandably furious about being snubbed, doesn't storm in and start yelling. She does something way more chaotic and honestly kind of genius. She rolls a golden apple into the middle of the wedding party with a single word inscribed on it, Callisti, which basically translates to for the fairest, or for the most beautiful. She doesn't say who it's for. She doesn't hand it to anyone specific. She just drops it and lets the chaos sort itself out. It's the mythological equivalent of anonymously posting someone in this group is fake and then leaving the chat on red. So obviously an apple labeled for the most beautiful dropped in front of a room full of goddesses is not going to end quietly. And it doesn't. Three goddesses immediately claim it's theirs, and things escalate fast. So the three goddesses who throw themselves into this fight are Hera, queen of the gods, and Zeus's actual wife, Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategic warfare, and Aphrodite, goddess of love and beauty. And none of them are willing to back down because in Greek mythology, being called the fairest isn't just a compliment, it's basically a status flex with real social consequences among the gods. So the argument gets so heated that eventually they drag it to Zeus himself, expecting him, the literal king of the gods, to just settle it. And Zeus, who is famously not an idiot when it comes to avoiding drama that could blow up in his face, takes one look at this situation and goes, absolutely not. I am not touching this with a 10-foot staff. Picking his own wife over two other powerful goddesses, or vice versa, was clearly a lose-lose no matter what he decided. So Zeus does the most Zeus thing possible. He completely punts the decision to someone else entirely. A mortal. A random Trojan prince named Paris, who at this point in the story is literally just hanging out on a mountainside minding his own business, working as a shepherd. So imagine you're just out here, tending some sheep, having a completely normal day, and suddenly three literal goddesses appear in front of you and announce that you personally get to decide who's the most beautiful woman in existence. That's not a fun surprise. That's an impossible trap disguised as an honor. So here's where this story goes from petty to genuinely unhinged. Because instead of trusting Paris to just make an honest, unbiased choice, all three goddesses immediately try to bribe him. Not subtly either. Straight up, out loud, competing bribes. Hera goes first and she offers Paris political power, control over vast territory, basically offering to make him one of the most powerful kings in the known world. Athena goes next, offering wisdom and unmatched skill in battle, essentially promising to make him one of the greatest warriors and strategists who ever lived. And then Aphrodite steps up, and instead of offering power or wisdom, she offers him something way more specific and, frankly, way more chaotic: the love of the most beautiful mortal woman in the entire world. And Paris, a random shepherd who apparently has main character energy despite having zero business making this decision, picks Aphrodite. He hands her the apple, Aphrodite wins the beauty contest, and in exchange, Paris gets promised the most beautiful woman alive. Sounds like a win for Paris, right? Here's the catch that turns this whole thing into an actual catastrophe. That most beautiful woman, a woman named Helen, is already married to a Spartan king named Menelaus. So Aphrodite didn't just promise Paris a woman, she promised him someone else's wife. So Paris goes and gets Helen. Depending on which ancient version of the myth you read, she either willingly leaves with him or gets taken against her will, and honestly, ancient sources disagree on this detail. Either way, Helen ends up in Troy with Paris, and back in Sparta, her actual husband is understandably extremely not okay with this. So here's how one guy's marital drama becomes an entire international war. Menelaus, Helen's actual husband, calls in a favor. Long before any of this apple chaos happened, a bunch of Greek kings had all sworn an oath to defend Helen's marriage, whoever she ended up choosing, because so many of them had wanted to marry her themselves that they needed some kind of agreement to prevent total chaos among the suitors. So when Paris takes Helen to Troy, Menelaus calls in that oath, and suddenly every king who swore it is obligated to show up and fight. His brother, Agamemnon, one of the most powerful kings in Greece, takes charge of assembling this massive coalition force. Warriors and kings from across Greece join in, including a guy you've probably heard of named Achilles, widely considered the greatest warrior of his generation. And just like that, one wedding snub, one vague golden apple, one impossible bribery contest, and one impulsive decision from a mortal shepherd spirals into an actual full-scale war involving basically every major Greek kingdom, all converging on the city of Troy for what mythology says was a full decade of siege warfare. And the whole thing eventually ends with one of the most famous tricks in all of storytelling. The Greeks build a massive wooden horse, hide soldiers inside it, and the Trojans, despite some pretty specific warnings from people within their own city, decide to drag the horse inside their walls anyway. That night, the hidden soldiers climb out, open the gates for the rest of the Greek army, and Troy falls. All traced back, mythologically speaking, to three goddesses fighting over a piece of fruit. So here's the actual takeaway from this whole myth. Ancient Greek storytellers weren't just building an epic war story for the sake of spectacle. They were making a genuinely pointed statement about how the smallest, pettiest conflicts, especially ones involving ego, jealousy, and vanity, can spiral into consequences that are wildly disproportionate to how they started. A snubbed invitation and a vague apple inscription eventually leads to a legendary decade-long war and the fall of an entire city. It's honestly one of the earliest and most dramatic examples in all of storytelling of the phrase, "this escalated quickly." And it stayed culturally relevant for literally thousands of years because deep down, everyone recognizes exactly how small the initial spark actually was. If nobody taught you the actual origin story behind the Trojan War in school, follow. We cover ancient history and mythology like this every single week. Comment which goddess you think actually deserved that apple because I have thoughts and I need to know yours too. And if you want more of this same "wait, that's actually how it happened" energy, check out the Cleopatra video linked right here. Completely different story, same level of unhinged drama.